Man, are you lucky. You get to see Broadsign has issues where comedy, conservatism, and Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. And it goes beyond that for tonight's guest. Oh, you know who it is. Stanley Ridgley, the one who wrote D.E.I. Exposed, how the biggest con of the century almost toppled higher education. Well, I think the jury's still out on whether it's going to be toppled by D.E.I. I know that we have a president that said he wanted to remove D.E.I., but it still seems to be putting its little tentacles wherever it can and just renaming it. But, hey, you might have been fooled for that, but you know who wasn't fooled about that? My sidekick, my producer, my son from my loins, Wyatt Leroy Stein. Wyatt, I'm glad that you're here with us to help us navigate the D.E.I. conundrum that maybe only you have an answer to, son.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've been studying this for years. Yeah.
Yes. You haven't studied anything for years, quite frankly.
I mean, it's only been a few months since I was done with the whole schooling thing.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Do you miss it? Do you wake up sometimes in a cold sweat saying, oh, I want to go back to college?
No, I do wake up in a cold sweat sometimes thinking about, oh, no, I have to go to college. And then I remember, oh, no, I don't.
Yes. Did you ever have dreams that you went to school in your underwear?
Oh, yeah.
Well, stop it.
Okay. I'll
Just saying, don't do that anymore. It's embarrassing.
I'll tell Dream Me that you told him that.
Wyatt, if you get embarrassed in a dream, are you embarrassed or are you pretending to be? Because a dream is really a movie played out in your head.
Can I hire better actors? I don't like the guy who plays me.
Listen, Wyatt, I got to tell you something. I don't know if did I mention where I was this weekend?
I don't think so.
Well, it's because I just got started. But I will tell you, this last Friday, I was at King's Trail Cowboy Church in Whitewright, Texas. I was at King's Trail Cowboy Church, Whitewright, Texas. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's the coolest church. It's got like a stable thing where kids can ride horses and the kids like have a youth center that's like in a grain mill. I don't know. It was like made out of like it was some sort of ranch thing. But the church was in this very cool building, almost barn-like, but better. And I thought it'd be a bunch of cowboys, frankly. I mean, it is Texas, and let alone called Cowboy Church. But a lot of them were just long-bearded guys that looked like they should be in a biker gang. Why? Were they trying to throw me a curve, or was it a dream?
I mean, why can't they be both?
Yeah. Well, as I said to you, the idea of a cowboy church conjured up the idea of the guys in their hats, which a lot of them do wear cowboy hats and boots in Texas anyways, and big old buckles, especially if they're rodeo guys. Yeah. But they, didn't, I mean, there was a few, but there was a couple of cowboy hats. But it was just a great vibe. But there was something I wanted to say about this, Pastor. You guys remember when I began to talk about the Corona crisis or the Corona cult, when they decided, hey, I know how to take over the world. We'll release a virus into the atmosphere that has a 99.8% survival rate, and then we'll tell everybody that they're going to drop dead in the street if they don't wear a mask, a welder's mask, and laminate their lungs. And then people will fall for it because they're stupid, and they're ignorant, and they're frightful, and they're cowardly, and then they'll do whatever they're told. Shut down their business, shut down their church, which some did. And they did that to beat Jesus, because Jesus would have shut down his church. Matter of fact, if the Roman Empire had said, I don't want you to preach anymore, Jesus would have said, yes, sir. And by the way, do you have a vaccine I could inject into my buttocks? And you know why? Jesus had a buttocks.
Is that really the direction we're going to be taking?
No, I'm just saying that he was a human
I'm just saying,
being.
of all the topics we could talk about in our limited time bantering, I think we could pick some better ones.
Well, I think Jesus was human, and we should be.
I'm sorry, you think this is the best direction we can take this?
No, I said that Jesus is human, and why don't we admit that?
Then why didn't you just say that?
Well,
why make it weird?
I implied it by saying he had a buttocks.
Yeah, you did. You definitely said that part. I'm definitely keeping that part in this.
White, I could have used other words.
You could have,
that
and
have
yet
been
you
crude
chose not to.
I chose the medical term buttocks. Buttocks.
I mean, you could have said he had a navel.
Yeah.
And you didn't.
Or
you
belly
went
button.
with buttocks.
Which one is more technically robust? Navel or belly button?
I'd say navel.
Okay, so instead of saying butt or, hind end, I said buttocks because that is the actual technical term. Jesus was a man, and so he was just like us. He had a lot of... Now, he was different in one way. He was God. That's a big, huge jump. In other words, he could walk on the water, for example. Just give me an example of what allowed him to separate himself from the common herd. But he could do that. But he was also normal, and that was part of what the beauty of Christianity and why it's true and no other religion is because it literally showed a man came to earth and proved it through miraculous things. But I don't want to, you're right, I don't want to really get off on Jesus and his physical anatomy. I just was making a point about his humanness. But when the corona started hitting, and one of the things that most bothered me was not that the government tried to impose draconian, totalitarian, unconstitutional impositions onto us as Americans in general, but to the church, which is sacrosanct. It's where all morality comes from, is from God. And so they went to the church, and they didn't just say, hey, you're important, but can you just shut her down for a little bit? Or, you're crucial to America, but just for a bit, can you hang on and not open just for a little bit? They said you are unessential. Now, if the church is unessential, then that means God and worship of God is unessential. So that means basically we are an atheist-driven country as opposed to a theist-driven country. And we've seen what happens when atheists are given power. Pol Pot, Mao Zedong, Stalin, Khrushchev, who else fits in that category? Well, North Korea, Kim Jong-un, whatever. I don't know. I don't do a lot of good North Korean proper pronunciation. You know me. Though I don't know if you know this, North Koreans have buttocks. But that's not what we're here to talk about today, though I did bring it up. I wanted you to know the idea of unessential. That's what most angered me, because they were not only insulting our freedoms, but they were insulting God to me, because he's the most essential. He's the only essential thing. He is the precondition for existence. He is the non-contingent entity that started the whole thing. So not only is he essential, but there is no essential without God. So I used to say this phrase, White, and I'm sure you heard it. Let's see if you found it. I used to say, if I was a pastor and they told me I was unessential, I wouldn't just open the doors. Do you remember what I'd say?
No, I do not remember what you'd say. Kick the doors open?
No, I said I wouldn't just open the doors. I'd rip them off the hinges. You remember me saying that? I've said it a million times.
Yeah, I remember that now. I just wasn't,
All right, so here's
I'm still thinking about the comment you made with the Jesus buttocks, and I just can't get that out of my head. How could you?
Well, I really wish you
It's
should.
gonna be over the sound waves the next couple of days.
Wyatt,
you kidding me?
I got to say something to you, though. So I think it's inappropriate for you to be trying to picture Jesus's buttocks.
Oh, I'm the
Well,
one.
I would just, if I were you, I would repent and start praying quickly, because that's sick.
Yeah.
What is wrong with you thinking about that?
You know who also needs to deal with this? Whatever sick.
I mean, you're still
person.
thinking about that? It's odd to me. It's like, it's like, move on, son.
It was such a kick in the face.
It was a kick in the face, which is better than a kick in the buttocks.
Yes.
But nevertheless, here's what I wanted you to know about the King Trail Cowboy Church pastor. So when they came to him. Now, this is in Texas, White, Texas. So it's, conservative for the most part, right, except for Austin and Houston and all the other cities that get overtaken by totalitarian fascists who then use their power to claim everybody else is a fascist but them, even though they're the ones that try to destroy everybody's freedom. But they came to him and said, you got to shut your doors down. They told him, right? As they did most of the pastors. Do you know what this guy did?
No.
Okay. It's a rhetorical question.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm getting to the point.
Okay. So this pastor, are you ready? Said, oh, you want me to close my doors and lock my doors and not let my people into my church? He ripped the doors off the hinges, put them in the parking lot, and burned them. Oh, he's taking it to the streets, my brother. That is a warrior pastor. That's what is necessary in America for this nation to go forward. Donald Trump isn't your savior, your salvation, or your answer. He can be used by God, certainly, but he's not your answer. He's not your savior. He's not your salvation. Jesus is. He is the foundation of all reality. He's the one that gave the moral foundation for the United States, the Christian ethic. And that's what must be taught from the pulpits if this country is going to survive. God is watching, and I mean watching close. But for this pastor to burn his doors, I said, this is the guy I want to hang with when the apocalypse hits, because he is a bad butt pastor. See what I said? I didn't say, the donkey word. I said bad butt. But Wyatt, as you know, we have been trying to build this podcast, and it is building little by little, step by step. We have been growing. But if you are listening or watching as we speak, I'd like to make a recommendation. Please like and share and hit the notification button on Brad Stein Has Issues YouTube channel. Secondly, go to bradstein.com and join the Militia of the Mind. It's free and allows me to have your email so I can send you newsletters. If you would like to join the Mighty 10,000, then you help give to the ministry that this is, which is unique and one of a kind. It allows me to go out and do live events. It allows me to do podcasts with interesting guests, and it allows me to try to grow this mission I have, which is a third great awakening in the United States, a re-remembrance of what it meant to not just be a Christ follower, but a disciple, which is all you've been called to be. I've said it before, and I'll continue to say it. You were never called to be a Christian. You were called to be a disciple, and it's hard because it's discipline. Where do you think we got the word? For those who want the full episode, because this is always truncated to fit a 45-minute time frame, you can subscribe, and on the back end of the Mighty 10,000 will be access to full episodes, and that's how we're going to help fund our ministry and grow this into something that becomes a juggernaut. So, that being said, sit back, relax, and enjoy this really important and informative interview with Stanley Ridgley. Well, folks, when a comedian gets on a podcast and begins to speak about words, there's a reason, because without words, we don't have a career. And without words that are uncensored, we don't even have the freedom to be valuable and helpful to the culture, which is really where comics can be most helpful. We get away with murder, and we've been allowed that for years. But you know what? Humans, Americans, have been able to speak freely for our history. That was one of the sacrosanct First Amendment rights, that we could speak and we wouldn't get our heads cut off. And those attacks against freedom, against the control of words, against control of the narrative, has been the fulcrum for every totalitarian, every despot, every monarch in human history. They don't want you to be able to think or speak freely without being controlled. Well, guess what? That has been reinvented in the form of DEI. And we got a new administration that supposedly is trying to take that down. I don't know how successful they'll be because it's pretty deeply inculcated into culture. But we do have a man who has written about DEI. His name is Dr. Stanley Ridgley, and it says DEI exposed how the biggest con in history almost toppled higher education. I wanted him on because this really means a lot to me. So please welcome, dear Brad Sign Has Issues, Dr. Stanley Ridgley. How do you do, Doctor?
I'm doing great. I appreciate the opportunity, Brad, to talk with you and your erudite audience about these important issues. Certainly DEI is on the front burner for a lot of people these days.
Well, indeed they are, and I appreciate your diving deep because the truth of the matter is your average human, right, is just trying to go to work, live his life, get a job, have a family. We're not really trying to be hyper aware of the nuances of controlling our behavior. We don't think like that, especially in America. So DEI is it's not new, right? It's just a reinvention of old control and values. So why don't you help us, since you are a doctor in this, to kind of give a foundation for where you think DEI started? I mean, are we talking about the Frankfurt School as going back that deep, beyond that, or what is it morphed into? So give us kind of a foundation so people know what exactly it is, as opposed to the way that people have used it to try to sort of say that you're a nationalist or you're a white supremacist. If you use the term in any way to try to expose it, you're suddenly considered, some kind of conspiracy theorist. So give us a background of what DEI is, and then let's go deeper.
Well, first of all, let's talk about what it isn't. The average person, as you note, has their own conception of what DEI consists of. And it's usually something along the lines of, well, we just want to give everyone a fair shot. We want to create a level playing field. It's just teaching about race, teaching about slavery. What's the problem here? It's noble, right, moral, and proper, right? It's just common sense. And this is because the DEI, folks who propound DEI, there's a national organization of diversity officers called the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education. And they propound this myth, this front stage version that I just described to you. Well, what is it really? Well, you're right. It has been around for a long time under different names. It does, and I didn't want to get too deep into the weeds, but thank you for mentioning the Frankfurt School of Neo-Marxism, which created critical theory, which led to critical legal theory, which led to critical race theory, which led to DEI. And that's where we are today. It's a crypto-Maoist, crypto-Marxist kind of program. And you can look at diversity and quote-unquote white supremacy as being placeholders that have replaced capitalism in the Marxist framework. You can look at class consciousness or class struggle has been replaced by critical consciousness, right? And racial awareness and identitarian awareness. Whereby the problem with DEI is this: it is a noxious, toxic ideology that is identifiable, and they say it themselves. It is based on a Manichaean binary of evil and good, and that's all there is. And I think Ibram Kendi even actually says this, that you're either a racist or an anti-racist, and there's nothing else. Right. And this betrays a kind of cramped ideological lens, the racial lens, where everything is tainted with racial overtones, not even overtones, racial content. And the problem with this is when these DEI hustlers come onto the college campus, by the way, it's a whole cadre of them who are modestly educated, mediocre people with no discernible skill sets, except this ideology. And the ideology says that people are divided into two categories. This is evil and good, oppressors and oppressed, villains and victims. And if you're a white person, you're a villain. If you're a non-white person, you're a victim de facto. And you don't have to know anything else about a person. In other words, Brad, you're walking down the street and you see someone coming towards you. You don't know anything about this person. It's a stranger. You can see maybe the way they're dressed, which would lead to a perfunctory judgment if you were inclined to do that. But other than that, no. But when you are imbued with this, permeated with this racialist view, this racialist binary, you don't see what you and I see. You see a villain or a victim based completely on racial content, based on racial immutable characteristics. This is not an exaggeration. I've had people tell me, well, you must be exaggerating. This is not true. This can't be true. This is not well, people who say that usually are ignorant of what DEI is on the campus as it's practiced. And this ideology is propounded. It's in the literature. This is what they say they do. And if you look at DEI Exposed, you will see this cited. I let them speak for themselves. There's nothing more damning than to let these DEI officers speak for themselves. And what they're engaged in on the campuses is called, in psychology, it's called virtuous victimhood, where if I can get myself designated a victim, and I can convince you that you are a villain, I can extract resources. It's a resource extraction strategy, which managed to get onto the college campuses in 2020 and 2021 in this current form of DEI. And it said, look, it's almost like Jesse Jackson back in the 1980s when he said, that's a nice business you've got there. To be ashamed if something, happened to it. And today it's DEI. So, that's a nice university you've got there. Be ashamed if people started demonstrating, showing that you're a racist organization. But you know what? We could offer you absolution. Open the doors to us, establish a lavishly compensated bureaucracy, and we'll fix things for you. But most important, we'll keep you out of the newspapers as being an organization that is racist, institutionally, systemic, and all of that. So that's basically the big con. It's an incredible, if you like big cons and you want to admire con artists, this is one to admire. It's absolutely brilliant. And I think it's coming to an end, however, because people are wising up.
Well, hopefully. I mean, it's hard to say. The deep state, which was so exposed during Corona, and I've said this numerous times, the one attribute of the Corona crazy that was, I think, healthy was it exposed so much that people simply weren't paying attention to. And nothing is more powerful than surreptitiously taking control. I mean, it's one thing to come in with a bayonet and a gun. At least I know what I'm dealing with. But if it's all happening under the shadows and especially it's always couched in virtue. It's always, I'm a Christian, so it's always a stealing of Christian virtues. And I say that not because I'm trying to, get people to become Christians, though I don't mind if they do, but more because the West was created on the Judeo-Christian ethics and morals. It just simply was. And so consequently, the very virtues that these people say they're trying to protect and so forth and so on, they think they invented it. They think that this is something that is innate in the human psyche and that we all take care of each other. And innately, if we're just left to ourselves, we'll take care of the poor and the downtrodden. It's like, no, that's not how the world has worked ever until Christ comes around. Well, one of the things that I do want you to help us understand, and the people listening and watching me, is this. Again, it's so easy to just sort of take a broad brush to any idea and say DEI, it's evil, and then they say, you're just a racist. Of course you're despised because you don't want your power to be relinquished and blah, 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 blah. And the truth is, to a degree, whoever's in power wants to hang on to it. So I suppose there can be little pieces of truth to the fact that there has been racism clearly in America. There has been one group lording over another group. That's very much the human experience, let alone American. So I guess what I would try to help us understand is how it's a manipulation of virtuous words, but they actually surreptitiously mean something else. For example, let's just start with D, diversity. Now, diversity left to itself is like, well, isn't that beautiful? We have different kinds of flowers, different kinds of mountain ranges, different kinds of foods, and so forth. What is wrong with diversity? And so they make this broad brush. You just don't want anything different than you. And it's kind of like, no, I love diversity. What I don't love is to consider that diversity means that all differences are equally valuable and coherent. They're not. Clearly, Nazism isn't as good as capitalism. That's a diversity that can't cohabitate. So can you help us understand? Let's start with the first one. We're going to go through the whole thing. Show me how they've manipulated what could be a beautiful thing, the diverse landscape of politics and philosophy, but how it's really used to literally become a racist or a philosophical manipulative word to make you self-censor yourself simply because you're different and you want to be equally dignified.
Well, the word diversity simply means variety. I mean, there's emptied of its political content that is really recently arrived at. There's nothing inherently moral, right, proper about the word diversity. It's simply a descriptor. We have you can paint your bedroom white. You can paint it, green, or you can paint it colors of the rainbow, which is more diverse, I suppose. But there's no inherent value attached to it except what you prefer. And so, in that sense, they've taken this word, this perfectly usable, useful word, and loaded it with political content. And it's a
Right.
code word. It's a code word. When you talk, well, we need more diverse student body. Well, you know what is meant. It's not so, oh, okay, well, why don't we bring in, a more Jewish and Asian American students? Well, no, that's not what they mean. They're talking about, in this case, they're talking about African American students, because non-white Asian Americans or Jewish or Hispanic Americans or South Pacific Islanders, whatever, are only non-white. They're only people of color when it suits the narrative.
Mm.
Okay, the idea of oppressed and victims. What I mean by this is that sometimes Asian Americans are considered what is called white adjacent. And this is a term that they've coined to get them out of the conundrum of having the fact that Asian Americans do quite well in higher education, and we're obviously being discriminated against at Harvard University and at UNC Chapel Hill, which is why the Supreme Court ruled in the favor of Students for Fair Admissions against Harvard and against UNC. They were discriminated basically against these students based on race. And so what we have is that people who have succeeded in this country against all odds are considered white adjacent. And people who have not succeeded under the conditions that we all suffer under are considered people of color and therefore victims of this binary that I've described. So diversity, again, is nothing inherent. It's basically a proxy or a fig leaf,
Right.
we should say. Very much like all cults utilize fig leaves and rhetorical evasions like this. I'll give you the example of the Unification Church. It's commonly called Moonies. Their big fig leaf and their slogan is peace and unity. Peace and unity. And that's what we stand for. The idea that we're going to bring you into our family of religious adherents by saying, oh, we're all for peace and unity. Well, we're all for inclusion and belonging, whatever the hell that means.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the rationale. That's the slogan. Inclusion and belonging. Peace and unity. It sounds very much alike, doesn't it? It sounds like a cookie cutter kind of slogan that's designed to recruit people into a cause, the details of which only become known after you're inside and already too late. So that's diversity.
Well, and I think the other problem is, and let's just be honest, your average American, I'm just speaking for the US since that's where I am, that's my sphere of influence. They're not, I don't want to say they're not educated. Potentially, I guess they are to a certain degree, but they don't go deeper. They don't really, when scenarios like this come up, they don't start digging in and going, I need to understand this so I can defend myself and my First Amendment rights. And of course, if you don't, then somebody's going to control you. They're going to take over. And if they happen to have power and they happen to decide they're going to use diversity as a cudgel to control you, and you don't understand it, it probably will happen to you. Freedom is fragile and you have to hang on to it. And that means you got to do some work. So I think that one of the things I've noticed, and again, as a comic, the one sort of perspective that I have that's maybe a little bit more articulate in framing things is because my entire livelihood is words. So I'm very familiar with words and the misuse or the abuse or the leveraging of them to achieve an outcome, because that's what I do, right? We find funny in something, but hopefully the words help you maybe see things in a deeper way that you wouldn't want to because of your presuppositional worldview that doesn't allow you to see dissenting viewpoints because you're concerned or you're afraid or you think it's going to diminish your, place in culture, as opposed to reevaluating who you are and seeing if you are in fact on the right side of history. So I'm curious about how diversity and how you've seen diversity, which again is a nice word. If we just stop at diversity, full stop, what's wrong with that? I mean, we want that. I don't want vanilla. I want chocolate and I want, all these different flavors and colors. So diversity sounds like what is wrong with that. But one thing I've noticed about the idea of diversity, full stop, is it also eliminates the ability for discretion to be able to evaluate different points of view and understand that some simply perhaps are evil or broken or toxic. And I'll give you an example. I remember talking to a policeman years ago on a talk show, and I was talking about this idea of profiling. And I said to myself, and I'm not a police officer, and I'm white, right? So I'm thinking, am I missing something? But I thought to myself, if every day you go out into the workforce and you might die because you're a policeman, so you're in a very difficult position where you're always going to meet people in the worst case scenario. They've just robbed a bank, they're running from something, they just hit their wife, they shot somebody, who knows? If you are in a scenario where a violence or your life could be in jeopardy every day, you have to be very, very stringent in being aware of the red flags. Is this going to be dangerous? Could this be happening? Who are the people that have caused me the most potential harm? And if that happens to be Black people, if that's what you've discovered, that most of the time when I've had a problem, that was the color, people would say, well, then you're racist in your profile. But he's saying, well, what am I supposed to do? If that is where I have most been in jeopardy, I'm not saying that all Black people bad, but I've learned to be a little bit hypersensitive because that is where I've had problems. Now that causes us to be put into a tenuous position where we can be considered racist because sometimes you will draw conclusions about somebody that isn't true because of your what you have experienced before that. So do you see how diversity by its nature and by what the word actually means can cause people to be concerned about overstepping what they're observing or stereotyping, and so in fact end up harming themselves out of trying to be virtuous and going over and above what would be maybe expected in even common sense? I mean, it's kind of a convoluted question to you, but
I understand it. I think that the simple answer to that is it's very clear that DEI has a worldview, and the worldview is, and they want you to accept this worldview, is that America is a racist country permeated with white supremacy culture, and you're supposed to believe that, and you're supposed to discount your what they say lived experience. You know, Brad, your lived experience doesn't matter. Okay, what you've just done is expressed this racism because of your lived experience, and what you should do, Brad, is you should discount that and believe instead this contrived worldview of good and evil, villains and victims. Accept the fact that you are a villain by virtue of your ethnicity, of your skin color, and that you owe some sort of reparations to non-white folks. Right. And if you don't, then you are complicit in this overarching system that they have simply posited, this white racist America. It's a very cramped and ideological way of looking at the world. It discounts everything else. It discounts religion. It discounts your parental upbringing. It discounts your education. It discounts, where you're from. It discounts everything, your entire your lived history. It discounts all of that. It seriously does. And that's what DEI people say. This is what they say, this is how they behave, and you must accept that worldview and then and then not just accept it, but then you have to become an ally and work towards a better world as they conceive of it. And so, yeah, you're right. What happens is, and hear this all the time on the college campus, we want students to, quote, get comfortable with difference. To get comfortable with difference, which is really a call to suspend your critical faculties, to stop making value judgments. And what we want from our students is to utilize critical thinking to make those value judgments, to make the tough decisions, not to be this open-minded, numbnut who says, "Oh, come one, come all." I'm getting comfortable with difference. I'm getting comfortable with alchemy. I'm getting comfortable with astrology. I'm getting comfortable with superstition. I'm getting comfortable with all sorts of nonsense. And I'm not going to criticize that. And you're basically stripping people of the ability to make those kinds of value judgments, which is what the university is all about. Come one, come all. Contend in the marketplace of ideas. And when you are found wanting, there's the exit. Okay. And in that way, we in the university perceive ourselves as progressing and advancing the human condition because we are willing to make those types of tough judgments. And I think that DEI has been shown to be a pseudoscience. There's nothing to recommend it that is valid. It is basically a toxic, noxious ideology grounded, from 1,000 years ago with the Iranian cleric Mani, hence Manichaeism. Good and evil, oppressors and oppressed. That's the template that they have used. It's the same template that Karl Marx used when he came up with the idea of class warfare, bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. You're one or the other, and this is the motive force of history. And I think that what they've done, they being the DEI cadres, have basically taken the Marxist template and basically transposed it onto today's Quran, the enthusiasm du jour, which is race, class, and gender, mainly race and gender, and are now re-articulating that Marxist theory. So that's diversity.
Well, and what's really interesting to me is how demeaning it actually is to minorities, because it literally is treating them like children. You can't discipline yourself. You can't accomplish certain things based on the color of your skin. So you are never responsible for the outcome of your life. And consequently, you aren't probably going to ever overcome, because especially in the United States, the one thing that is true is that if you decide, yeah, maybe some people will treat me badly, or maybe some people will discount me because of my skin or my height or my gender, whatever that is. But if I say, I don't care, I'm going to press forward, I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to overcome, virtually every time you will be successful, because you simply have decided to not be limited by other people's subjective definition of yourself. Now, that's called meritocracy, which is not only been historically proven to be true, but also leads us into the E of DEI, which basically dismantles that truth, that historically proven truth that people can overcome exorbitant odds and become successful by equity, as in all people should be given equal everything, irrespective of skill, hard work, fortitude, discipline. It doesn't matter. Everybody gets the same thing. Now, how in the world is anybody going to be motivated to accomplish or overcome or even to do something revolutionary if they're never going to be given any extra points for success? So talk to us about equity and why, sounding nice, the poor get as much as the rich and nobody gets to be thinking they're better than others, actually demeans and destroys the ability for a country or even a people to flourish.
Well, Brad, I think you cut right to the nub here in the sense that, your affinity for words, I share that affinity, and the idea that equity has become so popular is the fact that it sounds and looks a lot like equality, and it's not. Equality means we all get the same shot at the brass ring. That's what that means. Okay, we're going to remove the artificial obstacles, make sure that everyone has that opportunity to express themselves fully in our free society. Equity means that we're all going to end up at the finish line at the same time, irrespective of the way that's done. And the first expression of equity, I think, was Karl Marx in I think it was in the Critique of the Goethe program in 1875, when he issued his famous diktat. Most everyone knows this, is that from each according to his ability to each according to his need, which is equity. That's equity. And the fact is, you hit the nail on the head when you said that the idea that it saps motivation from people. Now, there's an experiment, and I've never done this, but I've heard, I don't even know if it's actually been done, but it certainly makes sense in a kind of a common sense sort of way, that you start with a college class and say, you know what, we're going to base our class grading on equity. So where we all end up at the finish line at the same time, and everyone gets the same grade. What we're going to do is we're going to take an exam. We have 50 people in here, and all the grades from 100 to say to 40 or so are going to go into the pot. We're going to total those grades up, and we're going to divide by the number of people in the class. and say that grade happens to be 88, which is a B plus, and everyone's going to get that grade. We have all contributed to the pot according to our ability, and we're all going to get according to our need, which is the same thing. We're all going to get a B plus. Now, for the people who work hard, people who are talented, people who work hard, stay up all night studying for the exam, versus the people who don't do anything to prepare for the exam, the ones who drag down the GPA or the grading curve, well, what's going to motivate the people to continue to work hard if they're working hard, not just for themselves, but their grades are going to be dissipated amongst those who don't work hard? What you're going to find out, and I think you know this as well as I do, as the semester progresses, the total number of points we're dividing is going to go way down because there's no incentive to succeed. There's no incentive to work hard. There's no incentive to do what you can to get a better grade because your grade is going to be pulled down by those who do not work hard. That has been always been the curse of the expression or the implementation of a Marxist society. We saw this with the Soviet Union. We saw this in the early communist Chinese society, which has been, basically Chinese society has really changed in the sense that they're employing, capitalist ways of motivating their employees. We saw it in Cuba. We saw it in Nicaragua. We see it today in Venezuela. The idea that we're going to create a socialist society where everyone's going to contribute to the pot and then everyone's going to get a certain amount from that pot. Well, the number of people contributing to the pot is going to go down. The amount of money that they contribute to the pot is going to go down. And this is fundamental economics. It's the idea of economic incentives. So equity is just like that. Because what happens is if you tell teachers, say in K through 12, that all of your students have to pass. They have to pass, regardless of their talent, regardless of the effort they put in. Well, you're going to do something that's going to be unfair to everyone, to make everyone pass. You are going to dumb down the curriculum. You are going to norm the grading to give extra points for trying hard. I like to use the example of people, engineers who create, the bridges that we drive across. Would you like to drive across a bridge designed by an engineer who received extra points in school for trying hard rather than expressing his knowledge of how to build bridges? No, I don't think so. The same way with any life-saving profession or life-critical profession, such as doctors, such as airline pilots, and that sort of thing. This is where the doctrine of equity really has a nefarious type of deleterious impact, where you're giving points for people who try hard. Well, that's not going to help someone when they on a plane that's going down because the pilot tried extra hard 10 years ago to get his pilot's license, but he really doesn't know how to fly, or he's likely to has a proclivity toward making mistakes, that kind of thing. So equity is really one of those words that is a very nice salve. It's a very benign sounding. It's what's called positive valence. It's a positive valence word that you really can't argue against except in the actual application of equity.
One thing I've noticed is that, and again, whenever you have these conversations, especially when we feel that we are somewhat objective enough to see something that is working or not working in real time. I mean, the truth is, we've seen the cost of DEI, Bud Light's a perfect example. They literally they were the #1 brand and they destroyed it. And maybe that's dust is settling a bit, but I don't think it'll ever come back to what it was. I think it kind of tainted itself forever. Meanwhile, somebody else just hired this woman. I don't remember who it was. Some other brand just hired this girl to come in and help them. So there does seem to be a doctor, and I'm curious about this, and maybe it's not that simple, but there does seem to be a disconnect from these people who refuse to they're so desperate to let this ideology continue to be the driving force of progressivism because they see it as virtuous. Let's just face it. They say we are the ones that are carrying the torch of a better society, of a better human flourishing, of a superior human race that will never get there without this idea going forward. Now, communists have used this technique for years. Hey, we noticed your communism caused millions to die of starvation and it was destroyed. Yeah, but here's why. You didn't do it right. You didn't do it right. They have touted that song of communism would work, but nobody's ever done it right to such a degree that you have to say to yourself, are you ever going to step back and reevaluate what you're doing and care about its conclusion
Yeah.
or not? And if not, what
Well, I have to
else?
tell you, I'm on a final note here because I'm getting a notice from on my social media platforms that I need to speak to another audience. But
Okay.
what I'll say is that it's almost as if the folks who are doing the communism, after Karl Marx, people like Karl Kautsky, Vladimir Lenin, even Stalin, and these folks are somehow not, these are idiots, and that they really didn't understand what they were doing. These were the premier socialist Marxist theorists of the age who weren't getting it right. And the folks saying that, well, they didn't get it right, you'll hear this in your own conversations, they didn't get it right. Well, who are you? Who are you to say that Karl Kautsky, who was the heir apparent to Marx, who are you to say Vladimir Lenin? Who are you to say these Leon Trotsky, for instance? Who are you to say that these folks didn't know enough about Marxism to get it right? You really hit the nail on the head when you said that these are folks that are really arrogant, today's Marxist socialists who say, well, these people didn't get it right. And they were far more, I have great respect for Marx, even Lenin and Kautsky. These were not stupid people. Leon Trotsky, these were not stupid people. These were people who used intellection as a way to contrive a way that we might live that turned out to be quite wrong. But we have to understand where they came from and how they did it. The people saying that they were wrong and that they didn't get it right are just absolute fools. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, as we get, you said you got to get heading out here, but I do want to conclude with one sort of marching orders. You wrote this wonderful book, and I want to say it again. I exposed how the biggest con in history almost toppled higher education. So, folks, we're going to put the link up. Just obviously, get the book if you want to understand this and go even deeper. But I want you to leave my people who are listening with sort of some weapons, some marching orders, something to forward. Let's make some activists out of people who are actually thinking things clearly. How do we destroy DEI? Because they seem to be repackaging it now in the universities so they can keep it, even though they've been ordered by the president to get rid of it. They're now saying, well, let's move it over here, move it there. So it's still happening. They're still trying desperately to hang on to it. So what do you think is the best way your average American citizen and or university employee, professor, whatever, dean maybe, how do we fix this thing, or how do we go about beginning to dismantle this thing once and for all?
You dismantle it on an individual level. If you're a student, if you're a parent of a student, by simply don't trust these people who are trying to train you into this ideology of hate and divisiveness. Don't trust these people. They do not have the academic credentials. They certainly don't have the moral credentials to tell you anything at all, to get you, to gaslight you, to disbelieve your own experience and your own upbringing. They simply do not have the gravitas to do that. And I think if you arm yourself with this notion of, why does this person want me to trust them? Why do they want me to disclose to them? Why do they want me to make myself vulnerable? Because they're coming after you to try to change your belief system based on this notion of critical consciousness. And that would be my advice.
Okay, well, folks, this is Dr. Stanley Ridgley. Get his book, DEI Exposed. Remember, that's what I do as a comic. That's what God's comic is trying to do for years, and what Bradsign Has Issues is. If they ever say to you, you're politically incorrect, always say thank you for the compliment. It means you are a truth teller, and we need that. And I'm just doing what I have to do. I'm putting the woke back to sleep. See you next Monday.